Hello everyone, we are live for our very first episode of Live from Our Living Room. So I want to say a massive welcome to you all and thank you so much for joining us. The purpose of Live from Our Living Room is to create a new series by Stairway Music where you're invited as part of our important community to talk about some issues and different topics that we think might be really important to you guys. So we want to have some special guests along from Stairway family, but also from the broader Australian church. And we want to invite you to ask them questions, offer some suggestions of your own. This is a really relaxed atmosphere. We just want to have a really natural conversation with you all here today. So I've just remembered to look at my camera. I'm going to try and do that more often as we go through the chat. I am now going to welcome my very first guest. So Matt Romano, welcome to Live from Our Living Room.
Hello, it's great to be here.
It's nice to have you on board. So Matt, today I'm going to be talking to you about worshipping with children, which is a topic that's near to your heart because you're part of our Stairway family and you're a pastor here at our church and currently serve as the assistant pastor for Foreverland, which is our children's program from children aged 2 to 12. But you're also assisting as our young adults assistant pastor at the moment as well. So you're keeping yourself very busy with church stuff, no doubt. And when you're not at church, I know that you love to play guitar and also relax in front of your PlayStation. And you also happen to be husband to Michelle and dad to Leo, who was born last year.
Yes.
Welcome along. So can you tell us a little bit about your role as assistant pastor for Foreverland?
Yeah, sure. First of all, I would just like to say that today I earned my top badge at Stairway Music, which I was pretty chuffed about.
That's
Came
exciting.
right through, so it's a...
You're a top fan?
Top fan now.
Love
top fan
it.
badge. So yeah, as you said, we utilize worship a lot in what we do in Foreverland. And pretty much my role is broken up into 3 different parts. So the first is caring and connecting with the families and children of Foreverland. So that's more of the pastoral administrative role. So that's equipping parents with valuable tools on how they can raise, faithful believers at home. Like we only have an hour with the kids a week. So we really try and, our goal is to try and equip the parents to make sure that they feel like they're equipped to teach the kids at home, and also providing curriculum and material for the children as well. I also train and develop our leaders. So that's providing leadership and training for the team that lead the children. So we've got about 70 to 75 leaders on the team. And so then they give so much every week. And so part of what we like to do is make sure that they're also receiving as much as they're giving out to the children. And lastly, I kind of coordinate and facilitate events throughout the year. So that's like conferences, children events, special Sunday events, worship events, leaders gatherings, all that kind of stuff. So I'm responsible for taking those events from like the dream stage, the inception stage, to making it a reality, and the many stages in between.
Fantastic. That's great to hear. Now, last year you became a dad for the first time to Leo.
I did.
How's
it's very
that
exciting. It's going wonderful. As you would know, you get a lot of advice from people before you're about to have a child. Some of it's good advice, some of it's not so good. But I think nothing can adequately prepare you for raising a child, and nothing really prepares you for what's about to come. We are so in love with Leo. He's just so amazing that it is a fun experience. I guess you're always learning because they grow up so quick. So we were saying from the start, it's like solving a puzzle every day. You feel like you've got a good groove, and then he changes, and there's all this other cool stuff that happens, and he can start, doing a whole bunch of stuff, and it's amazing. So we're loving it.
Awesome. That's so great to hear. So before we get stuck into tonight's topic, I wanted to do something a little bit unique for this episode. I'm hoping that tonight we've got some parents and carers who are watching, but also possibly we have some teachers who might also be parents, but In Australia at the
Go
moment,
teachers.
go teachers. Lots of parents and teachers are living a whole new world right now, with students learning remotely from home for the most part, and teachers having to come up with new curriculums and new ways of teaching kids remotely. So I thought what we might do as a Stairway music community tonight is just acknowledge them and just send them a bit of love and support. So
Totally.
audience, if I can ask for your assistance, I'd love you to, on the count of 3, just hit the heart, hit the love button, and let's just send parents and teachers a bit of love from Stairway Music. You guys are all doing such an awesome job. So let's send them some love. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Hit the button. Yay.
Love you all.
Love.
Doing a great job.
Awesome. So tonight, Matt and I have some things that we want to talk about in regards to worshipping with children. But we also want to give the people who are watching along at home, that's you guys, the opportunity to ask some questions. So make sure you put your questions, thoughts, comments in the box as we're going along. And towards the end, we'll have time to come back to those questions and thoughts and just really unpack this topic as a community. Okay, so Matt, I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit about the differences between children and adults when it comes to worshipping, because I'm sure we are all really familiar with what worshipping feels like and is like for an adult, but maybe you can help us to understand what's different for children.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think the most important thing is exactly what you said, to make sure that we know that children worship a lot differently to adults. If we can get that to start with, that'll help us a lot to know that children don't have the preconceived ideas of what worship is yet, and so they're still learning and they're still developing what it means to worship and what it means to, like, what is praise and what it means to give thanks to God. And so they can. It's a crucial time for us as parents to help guide them into what worship is. And I mean, and our, like, even as adults, our personal expression of worship changes as we develop, as we go on our years with God. And so for kids, they're first learning, okay, what is worship? And then they're starting to learn ways that they can worship themselves. And so, like, even personally over the years, and I'm sure it's the same for you, I developed my own unique way that I like to engage with God. It can be singing at church. I enjoy closing my eyes and using my imagination, which I feel like is quite key, which we can talk about later. I love, playing guitar, singing in the car as I go to work. But these have all developed as I've gone along, and they're always changing. And so we have to remember, as kids, they're discovering what their unique expression is, and they can engage differently. It's something that I remember learning years ago. I won't go into it too much because it's a huge topic, but just the way, especially preschool age kids, their motor skills, as they develop, you can start to see how they can engage in worship through the way they develop their motor skills. So there's essentially 2 ways. You've got your fine motor skills, which is like using small muscles. So it's like picking up small things, holding a spoon, turning pages to a book. And then there's gross motor skills, which is like learning to climb on furniture or learning to jump and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
And if we can start to pick up in our kids what motor skills are developing, we can then assign how they can worship. So, for example, I mean, it's not a bookmark rule, but boys tend to develop their gross motor skills before girls. So you might find that they want to dance and jump and, hit a drum or something and be more active for worship at a younger age, whereas girls tend to develop their fine motor skills earlier. So they might want to draw or write or be more creative in that aspect. So it's not a fast start rule, but if we can watch our kids at a young age, what motor skill they're developing first, we can then assign the way they can worship.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Yeah.
And so you've touched a little bit about, especially in the younger years, the sorts of things that you can pick up on developmentally. Maybe you can also share with us a bit about the difference between the way that children worship in different age groups, because I know you work with children between 2 and 12, but you know, you've probably got a whole range of different things that you do in those age ranges.
Yeah, totally. There's a bunch of different ways, but I think the main ones would be that in the older age, in the older primary ages, they engage through exploration. So they're full of questions. Like, you know, I mean, when in Foreverland, whenever we touch on worship or we're engaging in any kind of worship, there's always so many questions, which is great because that's how they learn and that's how they engage. You know, like why do we worship like that? You know, why do we raise our hands? Why does everybody dance and close their eyes together? And so our goal as parents is to help them engage worship through that. So be ready for answers for that because they do come. Another way is through watching. They engage through watching and observing. So they will know what worship is and how they worship through what we say and do. And so it's very important. If we're not doing it ourselves at home or in a corporate environment, we can't really expect our kids to engage in worship if we're not doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
So I remember at a young age, my dad was a worship pastor at a local Baptist church in the north. And the earliest memories I have of him was watching him worship Jesus on the piano just at home by himself. And he didn't really know that we were watching. We kind of would sneak in, you know, even after we should be in bed, get out. And like, I knew that obviously he loved the Lord, but I didn't really know how much he loved God until I saw him worship. And so to be able to see an expression of worship is always stuck with me. And so I always know, like when I'm with the kids in Foreverland and we're doing worship, I'm being the example and they engage through that. So that's kind of where they get their gauge from. And another one is they engage through facilitation. So, and our role is, and this I guess is more for the older kids that, well, actually, no, it's probably a mixture of the two, but we want to make sure that we're facilitating worship because, you know, their attention span can be a little bit short at some points.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be sensory. So, you know, we need visuals, we need movement, loud, you know, music, keep it fun and engaged, keep them engaged. And so, but what the beautiful thing is at a young age like that, they haven't really been told you can't do that or that's unreasonable. And so facilitating worship can be so much fun because you can just go wild. You can use their imagination. You can teach them things that they don't have to unlearn, like things like, you know, when we worship, our words are powerful. And so did you know that when we sing, we actually change atmospheres and we can shift the environment we're in? We can exchange fear for peace. And when we worship, we can actually change our weakness for strength.
Yes.
And things like that. And teaching them like when, and like when they worship, they can actually meet Jesus as well. And so we can facilitate that as well. So we say things like, did you know when we worship, we actually can meet Jesus? Like that's a possibility when we focus our attention on him. And so at that age, they haven't been told, you know, they're still learning. And so it's very important at a young age to help them learn that, so that when they go into worship, even as teenage years, they can go, oh, that's right. When I worship, I actually have authority and I'm actually talking with God, and there's a communion going on there.
Yeah, that's great. I love that you used to sneak out of your bed to watch your dad worship at night. My sister and I used to sneak out of bed to try to see Melrose Place, which my mum would have been watching. That sounds like a much better option.
I'm sure there were much cheekier things we used to do, but for the moral of the story, it was,
that was perfect. So now that we understand a little bit more about the differences between adults and kids and that difference in the age ranges as well, can you give us some really practical, creative ways that we can engage with our kids in worship?
Yeah, totally. It's such good questions. Like, I guess the first thing is for them to not put worship in a box. And so as adults, we all love to sing. I love to sing. I don't sing in tune. I love to sing. My wife's got a beautiful voice. And that obviously is a common way we worship, but we don't want to put kids in a box of what worship is. So we want them to remember that worship is everything. So it's like, it's our response to God. It's not, it's what we say, but it's also how we live and what we do. And so to start with, we go, okay, yes, it is singing, and there is that side, but there's so much more. And as well, so before I get into the practical ways, we also want to teach the corporate and the personal side. So we go,
private worship.
Yeah, there's private worship. So let's develop the secret place with Jesus. And this is where we have an intimate one-on-one relationship with him through prayer, through worship. And that looks different to what corporate worship is. And so it's very important to teach language with kids and go, this looks different at church because we're gathering as one big family. And so in the grade 5 and 6s, we actually bring them in to the auditorium once a month just to get them used to what corporate worship looks like. And then they go, oh, okay. So, and then I kind of teach, well, okay, that's one way where we're one whole family. We sing together, we declare, and that's one way. But then that's just one side. There's your personal secret place with the Lord where it's so much, where you can just go so much deeper. And there's just that. Yeah, so there's that whole side. So it's very, very important to distinguish the two.
Yes.
And there's some practical, creative ways. You've got singing. There's dancing for kids, especially right now. We're all at home, and if you're watching church on TV, my goodness, get them dancing, get them moving. What we do in the grade 5 and 6 room is we get them to write. So, and that I guess fits more into a soaking way of engaging in worship. So it's like, let's hear from God and let's download what he's saying to us. And so I actually have them keep a journal that they keep at in the room, and they add to every time we do worship.
Yeah, great.
And so by the end of the 2 years, once they've left to do youth, they have this full, rich journal of just all the things that God has told them as they have been in worship. So writing is another one. Obviously, soaking and being inspired to do something kind for a friend and a neighbor. So, like, we want to teach them that worship almost has a call to action. So there's a response required. Like, we breathe him in, and it causes us to be changed on the outside. Another great way is if your kids are learning instruments, get them worshiping on the instruments. A great way to, if they're reading the Psalms, that's another beautiful way to combine worship with reading the Word. I'd recommend the Passion Translation. You can even buy just the Psalms Passion.
Yes.
And it's just amazing. So even before they go to bed, just read one Psalm, and that can just be their worship. And then you follow up with questions like, what do you think that meant to you? And what do you think Jesus is trying to say to you in this, as we're worshiping? And so if we can expand our view of the kids' view of worship, it will become an opportunity to experience rather than an obligation to fulfill. And so, because then they go, oh, worship is everywhere. So if I'm walking to school, instead of just either getting my phone or doing something, I can turn my affection to him, and I can actually bless him and worship him. And then there's an interaction going. So worship, it's an opportunity at all times.
Yes.
And another, one more that I was thinking about is actually facilitating an encounter moment. So we've got what we call Foreverland Online, where we've got some content where we actually teach kids how to enter into his gates. So Psalm 100 verse 4 and 5 So what does it mean to enter into his courts with thanksgiving and praise, and what the response is for that? And we actually show you how to guide them through an encounter. And so that's it, just to give them a time where they can just stop and listen. And as a parent, facilitate a moment. So if you find that they're not, they don't kind of want to sing or dance, they're maybe a little more introverted and they don't want to do all that, maybe just have a one-on-one with them and go, okay, let's stop. Let's put some music on. Okay, God, what are you doing right now? What are you saying? What do you want to give us? Show us. What do you want to tell us? And then once they do that, okay, let's draw on that. So there's, I mean, I'm happy to maybe put in the comments later some good resources on how to facilitate an encounter moment with them, with the kids, because it's also a great way. Yeah.
Awesome. I know that you and the whole fantastic Foreverland team have been really busy putting together a suite of online resources that parents can access, that I know they'll find particularly helpful at this time, because whilst many parents will have experience worshipping with their children, many won't have done it exclusively like we are now. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the resources that are available online?
Yeah, sure. It's scwforeverland.com, and we've got, it's essentially our Sunday service for the kids. And so there's content uploaded weekly. We still have our whole Foreverland team contributing with content. They upload each week. There's parent resources. So there's things that we've done in church in the past that's up there for parents to be able to see and take. We've also got worship exercises and tools, and a whole encounter time section, which we're constantly adding new things to. And so we just want to make sure during this time, because we're not physically being able to see the kids and the parents, that they still feel like they're getting set up to win at home.
Yeah.
And because I know obviously juggling the schooling and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot going on. And so we want to make it as easy as possible for parents to have access to valuable resources for their kids, and worship and a whole bunch of other stuff as well.
Awesome. We've only got one question left. So just a reminder to our fabulous audience, if you do have any questions or any ideas of things that have worked really well for you that you want to add to the comment section, please do. Matt, just one last question on the topic. Is there just, any piece of advice or encouragement that you would give to parents who are sitting at home now watching this, or maybe watching the video later, as they prepare to worship with their kids?
Yeah. Oh, one thing.
One piece of advice, one piece of encouragement.
I would say, well, first of all, you never underestimate how much your children are watching and how much they value your opinion. And so it's always very important to be setting an example. So in worship, in views of worship, always be setting the benchmark and always be the ones who are showing the kids how it's done. And like I tell the story with my dad, like he would never know that happened, but that shaped my view of worship and my view of intimacy with God. And so we have such an important role. And if you feel like you're maybe you play an insignificant part, or you don't feel like you're doing enough, or you don't feel like you're being of value, you have such a value in your child's life, more than you know. And you may never know how much of an input you have, but you do.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
so I just want to encourage you with that.
That's really good. That's great. I was reflecting on this topic as I was preparing today, and I also just have one piece of encouragement for parents who are watching at home. And I think, for a lot of us, when we think about children and what God says about children, we think about Matthew 18 that says, I tell you the truth, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And that is a great passage when you're a parent and thinking, what do I need to teach them? What do I need to impart to them? That actually there's so much we can learn from watching them and letting them guide our home worship experiences at times too, because in our faith journey, we should be looking to children to see, that perfect innocence and that sort of, you talked about that out of the box kind of worship that we maybe as parents, as adults, don't think about anymore. So I just want to encourage all the parents and carers who are watching at home to think about, the way that your kids teach you about worship as well. Matt, we've had a couple of questions. One is from Anna. Anna would like to know how much we need to teach our kids based on our experience of worship as adults versus how much we need to just let children explore God in the way that they do and find him in unique places.
Yeah, it's a great question. We touched on it a little bit before, but I can definitely expand on that. So we want to make the net as wide as possible for what worship is for the children. And then as they get older, they start to decide what they want their personal, unique expression of worship is. Yeah. So the last thing we want to do is to teach them that it's just singing on a Sunday.
Yeah.
Because there's so much more to it. So let's expand their view, and let's teach them that it's actually our life.
Yeah, great.
Everything that we do is worship. And so, and then over time, they'll actually refine it themselves. And so, yeah, we all have a traditional way of doing worship. And I think in the corporate setting, we obviously follow a certain pattern, but especially for kids, we don't want them to think that's the only way, because we know that that's not the only way, and that's not the only way most of us worship. There's tons of ways that we do it outside of a Sunday, so we don't want to have them go, that's the only way. Let's just expand what they think worship is. It's everything. It's sensory. It's their imagination. It's
fantastic.
Yeah.
And Ali also asked a question around worshipping with her 3-year-old, who sometimes gets quite overwhelmed and emotional in worship. And so she's looking for some tips in terms of language, so things that she can use to explain the Holy Spirit to a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's great that you're noticing that she's engaging in that way. And so what I would do is ask her questions, and then help her to help her find the language that she's after. And so if you find that she's overwhelmed or is unable to express how she is feeling in that moment, it's our job as parents to try and unpack that for them. Yeah. So if they say that they're just for example, they're sad, let's unpack that. Okay, what does that mean? It could be that they're feeling his tender heart or his peace, but they just don't know how to explain that. And so I think I mentioned it at the start. We want to watch how our kids are developing, and then we can bring elements of worship to that. So we want to be watching how they're worshiping and how they're responding. Yes. And then we want to follow that up.
Yeah.
And let's help them find language for what they're feeling.
Yeah, great.
Even if it's just right now you're feeling what God's feeling. You're feeling his love. And that's why sometimes when I feel his love, I get overwhelmed, and that's how big God's heart is. And we want it to become, it's to help them give language to that. And they go, okay, I'm connecting with God, and I'm feeling what he's feeling.
Yes, I think that's a really good point. Sometimes when I talk to Mabel after we've been in worship together, be it at home or at church, generally when I ask her questions about it and ask her if she heard anything from God or understood what God was saying, it's often around God told me that he loved me. And I think, as a church that is passionately pursuing the relentless love of God, it shouldn't be surprising then when our children in worship experience that love of God. But that is totally something that you feel quite differently to the way you might experience the love of a parent or the love of a friend. So it's something to really unpack with them.
Yeah, totally. And to know as well that they can do that at that age, because we're talking, I believe 3 or 4.
So Scarlett's 3.
Scarlett's 3, yeah. And so that happens at that age. And so be ready for that and be prepared for that. It's not something that it doesn't happen to everybody, but it happens at that young age. So you could miss it. Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for your time today.
My
We
pleasure.
are going to wrap it up with a little segment that is 5 fast questions, and they're all your favorites of things. Are you ready?
Oh, ready.
Okay, first answer that comes to your head. So,
Okay.
Can you tell us your favorite holiday that you've ever had?
Favorite holiday? Oh, by far Italy. So
Italy,
my wife and I went in
choice.
2018.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What is your favorite? Yes, nice. What is your favorite TV show?
Oh, favorite TV show. First thing comes to mind, Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, great choice. Also.
Love Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
It's a very good show.
Love it.
What is your favorite type of takeaway?
Anything on Uber Eats, which is everything.
It's very handy right now.
Domino's is probably.
Domino's, Pizza Man.
They have a Parma pizza. Oh, it's heavenly.
I'll take your word for it.
Good.
What is your favorite dance floor song?
Staying Alive.
Great choice.
For sure.
Yep,
Staying Alive.
Got the moves.
PJs.
And last question, what is your favorite thing about staying home?
Getting to see Michelle and Leo a lot more.
Yeah.
By far.
Quality time.
That's
great. Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being our very first guest on Live from Our Living Room. We hope you had fun. And I will no doubt see you probably on Zoom again soon.
Yes, definitely.
Awesome. And audience, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being part of our Stairway music community. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time, our episode is specifically for musically minded people, for instrumentalists, and we're going to be talking about the rhythm section. So I'm sure I have lots to learn. See you next time.
Bye-bye.